please come into my room.
And welcome back to the MUstaSH Room. This is episode 3. We haven't thrown in the towel yet. Today, Patrick, my buddy from episode 1, comes back and he joins us to talk about microdosing. Also, we talk about Auger. And I'd alluded to Auger in previous episodes, but it's really been one of the best ways to start the growth process for mushroom cultivation. I initially started with spore syringes, and it's a great place to start with PF Tek and some of those earlier approaches. But once you graduate to try to identify contamination and just make sure that you're not wasting your time from the onset, Auger's fantastic. So we get into that. We talk a little bit about liquid culture, but that's yet to come. And we also get another visit from wifey Jill, and she talks about shiitake mushrooms. I'm a huge fan. You'll hear about that. She has some great information to share. We are expecting a baby girl in June, so that will be a theme. You'll continually hear about that as my life continues to change. We have upcoming episodes that will include my integration from my most recent psychedelic experience with penis envy psilocybin. I did not eat a penis. I did not eat a dick. I did not do any of that. This was purely the penis envy strain, but I had an amazing transformative experience that I really want to talk about. So expect that integration with wifey Jill, who was there during my experience here in the next coming episodes. Also, I will continue to work on that website. I know everything I've provided you thus far has been audio, so I'll try to accompany that with some visual aids and some useful links and blah, blah, blah. But right now, just getting started. So if you're listening, thank you so much. I really think you're going to enjoy this episode. Again, Patrick and wifey Jill, thank you and enjoy. I do want to apologize for last time. I feel as if it's my responsibility as the podcast host / coordinator to make sure that all the audio issues are ironed out, and I didn't do that. So some of our conversation, which was beautiful, was just not usable. So we'll have to recreate the magic as best we can in the next 30 minutes.
No problem.
I have been playing around with Auger and liquid culture, and I wanted to kind of discuss those. I know we have referred to them just and said, hey, I'll talk about those down the road, but I think they're relevant because we talked about the inoculation, kind of like the early spawn process the last time we spoke. This kind of plays into that, just a different method of inoculating and getting your process going. So if that sounds good, we can delve into that and kind of get educated on the process. Now, I didn't pay attention in science class, but if I did pay attention, I think I would have remembered using Auger. Do you remember using Auger in high school?
I do. I remember using it. I went to a fancy middle school where I think they used the equivalent of Auger.
Okay.
It was, to help grow stuff, in a Petri dish, classic stuff.
Yeah.
So I had some experience with it.
It's Agar. And so when I first saw it, I was like, Agar. And I had but my dad said, hey, my dad being a doctor who's actually used that stuff in a medical capacity, he's like, it's called Auger. So Agar, and there's a mixture for it. I found my mixture on freshcapmushrooms.com, one of our unofficial sponsors. Yeah. Love them, learn a lot from them. The guy's in Canada. He has a little Canadian twang to his voice. It's very enchanting, and he'll guide you through the recipe for Auger. That is loud as fuck.
Today I'm going to show you my process for making agar plates or Petri dishes for growing mushroom cultures.
Isn't this guy great?
The basic process for making these plates is to
mix
up
there it
barley
is.
malt extract.
Okay, that's it. So it's barley malt extract.
Barley.
I was thinking beer. I was, again, the wording was there, just not on the tip of my tongue. So nutritional yeast, Auger, and barley malt extract. And again, the actual ratio, the percentages of these components that you put in, FreshCap does a good job of laying it out. I'll put it on my website when I have the time to create that. So you take these components, you mix them together with just like any kind of water. It doesn't have to be distilled or anything like that. And it creates this sugary liquid. Now, the sugary liquid has to be sterilized, right? So we talked about how everything with mushrooms has to be fully contaminant-free, sterilized, over-the-top, rubber gloves, alcohol everywhere. So you have to take this and you have to put it in a pressure cooker to
On
get it
that
ready.
note, David, I apologize
Yeah.
for interrupting. Just because that's so important, have you, in your own experience, interacted where that wasn't completely the case, where you didn't keep things sterile and then there were problems for the
Definitely.
listener?
And that is a great question. So the problem with if you don't sterilize things properly, like let's say you don't leave something in the pressure cooker long enough to fully sterilize, or you don't sterilize at all, or you don't pasteurize, or a lot of the things that make things more resilient to contamination. The problem is you'll get far down the road. Maybe it could be 3-4 weeks, could be 6 weeks, and at some point of the process, you'll start to see contamination. So maybe, for example, if you did spawn bags, you might see mold start growing after 3 or 4 weeks. Or if you did jars, maybe the jars are just completely full of mold, or they don't grow at all. Things like that happen when some contaminants get to the nutrients instead of the mushrooms, instead of the mycelium. So the bad thing about
and it's fast too, right? Like within a very short period of time.
Well, the problem is maybe, and that's why
Oh,
Auger
okay.
is really good, and that leads to that's a good segue. With Auger, when you put the spores or whatever you introduce to the Auger, when you put it with the Auger, you'll know pretty quickly if it's bad. So
Okay.
let's get back to the contents here. So you mix this up and it creates a liquid. Then you sterilize it. I forget the exact period. I think it's like 30 to 45 minutes in the pressure cooker. Every time you pressure cook to sterilize, it always has to reach 15 psi. So if you
Okay.
buy like a shitty pressure cooker from from a Euro pressure cooker that has like a different measurement, whatever it is, it has to equate to 15 psi. If you do anything less than that, you're supposedly able to just do it longer to account for the pressure being not as high. So let's say you had 12 psi, you're supposedly able to do that for like a period longer to account for that. But I haven't had good experience at anything less than 15 psi.
Okay.
So I have that little 8-quart pressure cooker. That's good for like little liquid culture, but a 23-quart pressure cooker, the one that I use now, that's going to be much more helpful for larger batches, for things of larger quantities that you need to sterilize. Otherwise, you'll be in the kitchen all day long just sterilizing in a small container,
Yeah.
which my wife hates me. It's happened before. It was a day-long marathon of just nonstop pressure cooking. Anyway, so yeah, you make this stuff up. Now, the thing is, after you sterilize it and you let it cool, if you let it cool too long, it becomes this gelatin, right? So it's a mad dash to use the agar, prepare the agar before it creates a gelatin that you can no longer kind of work with.
So what consistency is it remain in? Like more of just a loose liquid or a liquidy?
Yeah, so when you mix up these contents, when you mix them up with the water and you put them in the pressure cooker, they're going to be full liquid. Like if it looks kind of like apple juice. So it's going to be full liquid, and it needs to cool down to an extent before you take it out of the pressure cooker. So usually I let the pressure cooker fully go back to where it started, 0 psi. Let it sit much longer, and just make sure that it's not scalding hot when I take it out of there. Because I don't know if you use a pressure cooker, it could be scalding hot for like 2-3 hours after it's done. You just need to wait.
Oh wow, no, I don't have any experience.
Yeah, and so the bad thing is if you take it out too early and it's still super hot, you're gonna now have issues with like steam and like handling it, and it's just gonna be a pain in the ass.
Right.
So I let it boil. I let it cool down to where it's usable, but not fully gelled up. So with using the pressure cooker, like if you have an 8-quart pressure cooker, you may not be able to find like a jar that fits in it well. So I've had to kind of jerry rig it where I have things laying on their side, supported by aluminum foil or dishes or things like that.
Right.
If you watch these videos, if you do the homework, like Fresh Cap, they do a good job. They'll show you what they used, but they always use a 23-quart pressure cooker, nothing less.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's like having a big dick. It's like, yes, this is my dick. I use this dick for great things. If I had an 8-quart dick or a 23-quart dick, the latter is far more appealing. And you can brag about your big pressure cooker.
I just want to argue for it's how you use the 8-quart. And you're saying you put it into a jar, but why does it maintain its status just going into a jar?
Well, it hasn't had a chance to fully. I don't know what makes it gel up like custard, but it hasn't fully had a chance to, I guess, interact with the atmosphere to gel up. So the big thing is make sure it's usable, make sure it's pourable. Then you take it and you have to put it into your sterile environment. So, like I told you last time, I don't have the laminar flow hood. I don't have the my dick isn't that big yet. You know, my balls are big, but not fully erect. So I have to use the still air box, and the still air box is just an upside down Tupperware container, see through, with a couple armholes. So, like I said, the whole goal is no contamination, no floating, moving particles, and as sterile as you can possibly get. So I don't know if I showed you my still air box, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I use like a couple coffee cans. I burn them on the stove and press them against the plastic to create the armholes. You can be creative with, all kinds of stuff, but ultimately you have to be able to get your arms into this still air box.
Right, yeah.
But once you get your stuff in there, so if you get your Auger into the still air box, and again, it's pourable at this point, make sure that the Auger doesn't get exposed to the environment. Make sure it's still in its make sure it's still sterilized, and get it into your still air box. And then you're going to pour your Petri dishes. So the bigger your container, the more room you have to work inside your still air box. But if you get a tiny still air box, you really can't move. You're really constrained. Like old school, early NASA videos where they have like those industrial still air boxes. They can barely do shit.
Right.
So you don't want to be stuck with that. So get a decent sized still air box. Once you pour your Petri dishes, you have to seal.
And they sell these things. I know you made yours, but they sell these things.
Good question. Yeah, you can just go on Amazon and buy like 25 Petri dishes for $12.
But I mean a still air box.
Oh, so yeah, you can really use any clear Rubbermaid container. So
okay.
What I'd like to do is I'd like to get one that's a little bit taller, just so I have more vertical room to work. A lot of them are going to be smaller and wider. So just think, you have to be able to put your arms in there and interact with whatever's in there without taking the top off and exposing it to the outside air. Yeah. So it's just, how many times do you want to say fuck during the process? Like, you want to say it once, twice, or do you want to just be nonstop fuck ranting? It's up to you. Once you get the dishes filled with this Auger in the liquid sense, once it cools off, it will be gel. So your dishes will look like, I'm trying to think of I guess like Jello, like a little bit like a hazy Jello. They'll look like a hazy Jello. So you don't want to fill them too little. You don't want to fill them too much so they're overflowing. I would say about like halfway vertically, and then
so a quarter of an inch.
Yeah, I would say so, if you want to be specific. So yeah, pour about halfway, quarter of an inch, and then you're going to use this parafilm, which again, if you follow these instructions, Fresh Cap does a great job. They talk about parafilm. It's a permeable yet contamination-free tape that you put around your Petri dishes, just to make sure they can breathe a little bit, but they're not going to be susceptible to contamination.
Okay.
And I put a little bit of activated charcoal in my my Auger. It makes them like almost black, like a blackish, like a hazy black. And the cool thing about it is, when you create your Petri dishes, when you inoculate your Auger, which we'll talk about in a second, it creates these really cool patterns that are suspended in this black Auger. So think of it like a squid in the sea. Like if the sea was like a hazy gold, the squid wouldn't look as cool as if the sea was completely black. And that's essentially what you see with these Auger dishes. So like if we look up black Auger, other people are doing this too. Just use activated charcoal. And just a little bit, doesn't have to be a whole lot. But yeah, you can see like this is exactly what the black Auger looks like. The black Auger plates. People are selling just Auger plates online, which is kind of cool. So yeah, you create those, and then when they fully get...
Wow, 20 for, sorry, but at the time of this recording, you can get 20 for $37 on Etsy.
Yeah, which is really not that much, considering you pay $12 to get the plate itself. I mean, maybe they buy them in larger quantities, but yeah, do it at home, man. It's a pretty easy process. And these don't look like they have parafilm. Well, I guess some of them do. Anyway, so black Auger, you can see when it's when the stuff starts to grow, when the mycelium starts to grow, you can see, here's an example. So you can see how the mycelium looks in the Auger. See how it's suspended there in the blackness? Mm-hmm. That's way cooler than just suspended in regular Auger. Yeah, it's just a different color, not as cool. So for the aesthetics, yes, I don't think it provides any additional nutritional value or anything like that. But just to be cool, you can add the activated charcoal. So you have your dishes. Now they say you're supposed to put the dishes in like a really cool climate, like a refrigerator. Since I have everything in my basement, I'm basically rocking like a mild refrigerator. So I keep
Right.
them in like the 60s, 60, 65 degrees. But I think the recommendation is maybe a little bit cooler than that. So I'm not really sure what my basement does versus something else. I don't have a basis for comparison. So you may want to do a little more research if you don't have a basement. So up until this point, we're good making auger plates. I mean, we haven't done it yet, but theoretically, yes, we can make some auger plates.
I feel like we're ready.
Okay. So once your auger plate is done, and again, cooled off, everything's gelled out, you may see some steam, some condensation on the underside of your Petri dish, or the lid. No problem. Don't worry. That means it was just a little too hot when you put it in there. All right. So you need to take these Petri dishes and you need to inoculate them with some sort of mushroom spore or existing mycelium. So you would use like a spore syringe. We talked about that. Use a spore syringe. You could use liquid culture, which is mycelium suspended in a sugary liquid, or you could use other agar. You could cut a piece of other agar and put it in there. But one way or another, something that needs that sugary nutrient associated with the mushroom in its infancy has to go on the agar.
And where is the auger at this point? Where have you moved it to? Your little, or to what?
So yeah, if you're going to inoculate, now you're susceptible to contamination. So you have to move it to a still air box or a flow hood. So with me, what I did is I took all my Petri
with
dishes.
Another substance, right? Aren't you using like a? I know we haven't covered it tonight, but what's it called? What's the substrate?
Yeah, the spore syringe.
Okay. I thought there was some other maybe material that was involved.
Not at this phase, because at this phase, what you're trying to do is just propagate more mycelium. So remember, with the substrate, that's where you put your mycelium to now expand and grow in a bigger landscape.
Okay, so we haven't got there yet.
Haven't got there. I guess we're working kind of a little bit in reverse, but ultimately, the agar is a good way for you to just get started. And then once you get started, now you can take this, move it to your substrate, and continue the process. But for me, I like this because if I put my spore syringe and I inoculate the agar, within like a matter of a week or so, I'll know if it's bad. I'll know because it'll mold up. It just will not grow any mycelium. So I can kind of head off the pass of having a major contamination issue by just testing it with the agar.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I can use a spore. The spore will take the longest because it has no mycelium to work with. But I can totally use a spore. I can use other agar. Like I can use an X-Acto knife and just cut a little bit of agar off of an existing plate and copy that into my agar plate. It's a replication process, pretty common with people that work with agar. Or I can take liquid culture, which is, I don't think we're going to talk about that today, but down the road, all that is it is essentially a liquid form of the agar. It's like mycelium, the white stuff, the early phase of mushroom, all minced together inside this liquid. Not gelled up, but liquid. It's pretty cool. So, like, you take a magnetic stir, you break up all the mycelium, and then that goes into a syringe, which then can introduce the liquid culture. The syringe can go into the agar, syringe can go into a spawn bag, syringe can go anywhere a syringe
the syringe is loaded with active spores, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Bunches of active spores.
Well, actually, post-spore. It'll have spores, but it'll also have the next phase of spore, the little itty-bitty bits of mycelium. Jump-starting that process, actually.
Yeah, and the beauty of that is then you can just add it to a bag of ready-to-go substrate, and you're in business.
Exactly. Yeah, the cool thing about the liquid culture, and again, I haven't used the liquid culture as much as I have with the agar and the spore syringes. But the cool thing about it is, I mean, a lot of the work is already done. So you bypass a lot of those early steps that just take longer. And with mushrooms, I mean, if you have to wait a few extra weeks or a month, I mean, it's just, it's a long process to begin with. So why perpetuate the process any more than you need to?
Yeah, and it seems to again just put you in a ready state all the time.
Yeah, yeah. So people will take their liquid culture syringes and they'll store them in the refrigerator. Um, People have different methods of like the orientation of the needle. Some of them use slant syringes or ways to make the mycelium more plentiful. Ultimately, I just store it in its normal form, just in a normal syringe or a jar or whatever will hold that liquid. But yeah, the auger is badass, and it's a cool little thing to play with. The patterns of the mycelium, they're all different. They kind of, I don't know that they replicate their spore print, but they have their own individual personalities. So not only are you growing mushrooms kind of like, step by step and just nurturing these things, but you're also creating these weird like snowflakey patterns as these Petri dishes start to grow.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So I will. I need to share some pictures because I have some. MUstaSH is, and I may be mispronouncing that, but one of the better strains of mushrooms that I've been growing, MUstaSH, has these amazing patterns in the Agar. So I'll have to show those to you. I found those really fascinating.
Oh yeah!
Sounds like a good time to interrupt and provide you with a health segment from Wifey Jill. Here we go. Thank you so much for returning to the podcast. You always inspire me in so many ways, and hopefully that can transcend into the listening audience.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And Brody's here as well. He's going to be silent unless somebody rings the doorbell, and then in that case, he'll be very vocal. But thank you for your contributions, Brody. So this is going to be a regular segment, like I mentioned before, and my wife Jill, being an expert in the field of health, nutrition, dietetics, really has taken an interest in mushrooms with me in both a medicinal and culinary sense. And so I want her to just kind of educate me and the listening audience in some of the areas that she feels are worthwhile, and also hear her lovely voice. So Jill, thanks for being back. What do you have for us this week?
Yeah, so this week we are going to highlight the shiitake mushrooms. If you can remember, we had some last week.
What was that? What was the name of the dish?
Oh, I don't know the name of the dish.
What was it again? I guess.
Shiitake mushrooms with steak.
Oh, with the steak, okay, that's right.
Yeah, so we had topped some steak with some shiitake mushrooms that were cooked in sherry wine, which is an excellent pairing for the mushrooms, which I've since learned is really a popular Spanish dish. Sherry wine and mushrooms. You can also add some cream and make it more of a creamy sauce. But the sherry really does bring out the woodsy flavor of the mushroom, and it really does highlight it.
That was really good. And I have to say, of all the mushrooms, other than just normal mushrooms on my pizza, anything that touches pizza is gold. So those mushrooms are in a separate category. But other than that, I'd have to say shiitake are my favorite, the tastiest in my opinion. So that was a good dish.
Yeah, no, I love the texture of the mushroom. It's a nice meaty flavor, a nice rich earthy flavor as well. It can really hold up to meat. It can hold up as a side product. Or if you're a vegetarian, that's a great way to kind of, feel like you're still getting, a meat product on your plate, but it also has a lot more other benefits, nutritional wise and, calories and minerals and so on.
Yeah, what this article that you sent me here from WebMD, Shiitake mushrooms, health benefits, nutrition, and uses. Was there anything in particular you wanted to highlight in this article?
Yeah, so I will say shiitake, is first cultivated in China, but now it's pretty popular nationwide. It is extremely rich in copper, which is very good for you when it comes to, let's see here.
Copper, huh?
Yeah, copper is an essential nutrient that many people probably aren't aware of. But it's a mineral.
Definitely one of those many people. I had no clue.
Yeah, it's a mineral that supports healthy blood vessels, bones, and immune support. So just half a cup of shiitake mushrooms a day will give you 70% of your daily recommended intake of that mineral. It's also good for heart health. It helps reduce cholesterol levels, can reduce inflammation in the body. It helps prevent the intestines from absorbing the cholesterol. So that's where the beta glucans can come in. It supports immune health. Other minerals and vitamins that it does provide are going to be vitamin D, pretty much all the B vitamins. We're talking B6, niacin, riboflavin, folate as well, and it's also a good source of iron and potassium.
I love it. A couple things I wanted to point out. When you mentioned the dosage of shiitake mushrooms, that doesn't mean you have to eat a fistful of mushrooms that weighs that much. They sell ground powdered versions. They sell encapsulated versions, or you can cook them in a dish. So I know when people think of just eating a certain quantity of mushroom, it's like, oh man, let me just get this little basket and stomach it.
Well, a half cup is not a lot.
That's
I mean,
true.
we're talking less than the size of your fist.
Okay.
You
I'm
know,
not good with math.
yeah, and then when you talk about capsules, again, that's even more specific.
That's true.
So you have to kind of see what those are. Dried shiitakes are very popular, and a lot of times they're rehydrated, so you can get to that half cup serving size. So yeah, half cup is by no means a stretch by as far as consumption wise,
Sure.
because if you think of the steak we had, it was just topped with, I would say, a good half cup.
Oof, I just got wood. That
What did you just get?
I just got some wood there when you mentioned
Oh
the
my
steak.
God.
Sometimes memories, they can do that. They shouldn't be food related. Anyways, so the shiitake mushroom, again, if you want it in a daily, like you want to do it purely for medicinal benefit, then you may want to look at something that's easier to consume, like a capsule or something. But if you want the taste benefit, which we benefited from with our steak, cook it up and rock on. That stuff's awesome. I also wanted to point out vitamin D you mentioned. Vitamin D, people are inside these days with the COVID and all the lack of social interaction and whatnot. So you may not be outside as much as you once were. Vitamin D comes from the sun traditionally. These quantities are not very high, but mushrooms the only real thing aside from the sun that can provide you with vitamin D. So that was a great highlight as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I'll always say, any sort of nutrition is best absorbed naturally. So if you can eat the product versus taking a supplement, I would highly encourage that. Shiitakes are they're easily to find. They're the third most popular mushroom. They're usually found easily in your supermarkets. The first two are going to be your oyster and your white mushroom, or the white button, I should say.
Yeah.
So those are the ones on your pizzas.
The very
they're
basic
so
mushroom.
basic.
Yeah.
I mean, they still can be great. They can still be infused with a lot of flavor with marinades. But yeah, shiitake, it sounds fancy, but it should be available in your local grocery store.
Cool. And I know if you're concerned about or if you're curious about cultivation, shiitake, I believe it best grows with hay, sawdust. I think it's of that genre of growth. So it's not like your traditional psychedelic mushroom where you're going to use rye and some other things. It has special consideration that has to be taken when you're picking your substrate. So I don't know if let's actually take a look. Did you look it up?
Yeah, so it does say that it can grow either on natural fallen logs or artificial substrates. So it doesn't say what type of substrates.
Okay.
So you would be the expert on that side of things.
Yeah, so I think you're looking at more of like a sawdust or hay or something like that to use as your substrate. So definitely not something where you just throw your traditional hydrated rye in there and away you go. But yeah, those things rock. They're fairly expensive. So, if you can find a way to harvest those with some YouTube videos or whatnot, you can save yourself some money.
Yeah, so I would just, recommend you can cook them up with your omelets. They're great as a side dish, like I said before. Make a risotto and add some caramelized shiitakes in there. Stir fries are a great way. They also partner well with a cream sauce, like I had said earlier. So if you wanted to make fettuccine or creamy mushroom soup, those are some nice ways that you can squeeze it into your diet.
Heck yeah. Plus, it just sounds like you know what you're talking about culinarily, if that's a word.
Yeah, it sounds fancy.
When you mention shiitake, people are like, oh. Well,
they take you a little bit more seriously.
Yeah. It's like when I say I'll have a bottle of Chardonnay. It's like, oh, well, you actually knew that there's a wine called Chardonnay. 3 syllables came out of your mouth in the wine. Anyways.
Yeah, and then
Scotch guy.
so a half cup of shiitake, it's only 34 calories, and then it has 2.5 grams of protein in just a half cup. So when you talk about protein dense vegetables and substitutes for meat, that is pretty substantial when it comes to a vegetable. So yeah.
Heck yeah. Plus, anything that's a meat alternative that provides protein these days is a win, right? I mean, you're not contributing to the carbon emissions and all the the factory farming and all that stuff. So it's a win for everybody, including
Yeah,
your heart.
and protein sources, whether it's from animals or plants, they're derived from different amino acids.
Find him stroking a cat, and you're stroking a Brody just reminded me
Well,
of
now
that
Brody's
visually.
disappointed I'm no longer stroking him.
Hey, there's nothing better than a good Inspector Gadget episode, so just consider it a compliment. I do want to mention to the listening audience, even though we're not on a last name basis, my wife and I, Jill, we are going to be having a baby girl in June.
Yeah.
So some of my talk may incorporate some gonna be a daddy context. Paternally.
Daddy mushroom.
Yeah, I am very excited. Also, I had a really amazing mushroom experience that Jill and I are going to talk about here in the in the near future. I want to do an integration with Jill because she was with me, and it was really special to me. I don't use the word special very often because that can be kind of nerdy. But yeah, it was special and awesome and powerful, and I want you guys to hear all about it. So to be continued. Jill, thank you so much for being here. I love you very much.
Yeah, love you.
So I've been dosing and microdosing with the PES Amazonian mushrooms.
Another great strain.
Amazing. I can't vouch for them enough, and they're powerful. They're incredibly powerful. So I've been just about every other day. I started testing out. I wanted to do some microdosing.
Yeah.
And thought that would be somewhere around maybe the 1 gram dose, but I was wrong. In fact, I found out even just under a half is a bunch to try to manage as a microdose.
Okay.
What I have found is 2/10, a tenth, in fact, to 2/10 is a nice microdose.
Really?
A lot more than that, and it can make your day a little wonky.
Okay, and I was reading, somebody said 300 micrograms every third day was a proposed schedule. So you're saying 100 micrograms to 200 micrograms?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's, how often did you take that?
Every, I was following a schedule of Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay.
And then sometimes I was throwing in a Sunday. But consistently for the month of November, it was Tuesdays and Thursdays. And early on, I accidentally
I like where
probably
this is
did
going.
about 2.25 grams of these, and also was in a isolation tank, which was pretty awesome.
Accidentally.
Well, I think I just grabbed too many, and I hadn't been using a scale at that point. I promptly got a scale.
Yep.
And
been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the freehand sounds good, but no, not efficient.
No, not with these. It was my first kind of delve into these things.
Yeah.
And I made a big mistake. And
I'm glad you survived.
but it was super fun, and I managed. It was all great. But just the same, it was a little bit more than I was expecting. And so I've been paying attention, and I came to realize, 2/10 of a gram is very a very decent thing. And
Okay.
and also just for anyone listening is I'm usually starting this at about 6:30 in the morning.
Okay.
So the majority of the action is done by 8. Anything that's discernible is done by 8. Then you're just but I'd say it's an uplifted mood. I've been writing. I've been using the time to write and meditating. And when I've gone too far in thinking maybe my old comparison, I used to enjoy the golden teachers a lot.
Yeah.
And I could microdose with those at a greater amount. I didn't find them to be as strong. But so again, in comparison, I could eat a few more of those, but these you have to really manage under half a gram as far, on an empty stomach. Because that's the thing, I'm going in on an empty stomach, using lemon tech, chopping it up or chewing it up with a fair amount of lemon juice before I
Lemon
go
juice.
into it.
Is that
Yeah.
just to disguise the taste, or is there some other?
No, not at all. What it does is you do it because it begins the digestion process early,
okay.
so it creates it's a more intense but shorter experience.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
'cause it,
I'd never heard that. I'll have to check that out.
yeah, it's pretty worthwhile, and again, I'm trying to take out any variables by having as little as possible in my stomach, and trying not to drink too much water in advance or after, giving myself a break.
Good.
So
Now, would you say you could function as normal? I realize you're trying to get creative with writing and stuff, but
yeah, no, 100%. As long as what I've learned is I'm not crossing a barrier of more than 0.2 of a gram.
gotcha.
I and within 0.75 of a gram, it's reasonable function, but I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't, but definitely 0.2 or you'd get some benefits, and you wouldn't have any issues functioning at all.
Cool. And you, the empty stomach just gives less obstacles for
Yeah,
the mushrooms to do their thing.
yeah, it's fully absorbed that way. And and that's why if on nights where I've taken them, I've made sure I haven't eaten for at least 6 hours. But the nice thing is starting it after waking, after having like a fast of 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's nothing to get in the way. And also what I haven't done, but I've read about is grinding it up, because then the greater surface area, which you want to chew it up as best you can, but I don't think you're going to beat electronic grinders. You grind it up and then mix it up with some lemon juice. I just think
Lemon
you
juice.
get there pretty quick.
Yeah, I have a coffee grinder and I've ground it up, but I usually eat it with like some cookie butter or something super tasty. I'm gonna check into this lemon juice thing because
Yeah, and on an empty
sounds
stomach with
good.
nothing else like to compete with it, I
Okay.
think does something, and so I recommend the experience. I think it's been very beneficial, and
So the people that are listening, that's 1 to 200 micrograms or 1 to 0.2 of a gram of psilocybin ground up, and you said Tuesdays and Thursdays, potentially Saturday, so like every other day.
yeah, potentially Sundays, like
Okay.
Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then Sunday nights, if I'm mixing it in. But and I've read a study about a person that did 1/10 of a gram for a year every day.
Okay, every day.
And
And
I'm
he didn't
considering
get. I guess. Sorry to interrupt, but people say that you gain some sort of tolerance. Did that come into play?
I don't think I think with such a small amount, because per what the author said, they would occasionally do bigger doses and were no less affected by them.
Wow.
Because the small dose, I think if you tried to do big doses day after day after day, the great part about mushrooms is your body ends up building this tolerance where you can't get anything anymore. So you can't really hurt yourself either. So
I love it.
um,
Love it.
yeah.
That's awesome. So he did 100
A
micrograms a
tenth of a
day.
gram, or 100 micrograms every day for 365 days in a row.
What a badass.
So yeah, it sounds interesting, and but again, I like the idea of I found a nice like workable thing, because again, as long as I'm starting by 6:30,
Yeah.
the majority of it is kind of passed by 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's not that much going on anyway. But it's definitely it feels good, and there's I've had at least increased creativity
You could
personally.
you could probably do a booster like midday if you wanted, right? If you wanted to keep it going.
I guess I haven't thought about that.
All right. On the
well,
next
the only-
episode.
yeah, we'll check back in a month. I think I'm going to do that. But I think the only thing is that I would fear, again, like I would fear the body starting to build a tolerance to it by chasing it like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think that's where, especially as long as you give it the 24 hours, I think you're okay. I think it's where if you just kept eating them, and I think that's the study that was done that I'd read about years ago, is someone just kept eating them, and then ultimately it's like, oop, no, it doesn't matter. It became shiitake mushrooms.
Okay.
It had no effect anymore.
Okay. And
So-
nobody wants to get to that point.
No, God no. I don't
cool.
want to just have a a disgusting
Yeah.
tasting mushroom to add to food.
Exactly.
So.
No, that I wouldn't pick that taste for anything. But
No.
there's beauty behind the disgust.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
So yeah, report back to us. I definitely want to hear your journey with microdosing, and like if you have any setbacks or if you decide to take a pivot or whatever. As you come back and chat with us, I definitely want to know how your journey's going, because I think it's gaining a lot of momentum, especially for people that are listening. 5-panel drug tests at work, they don't test for psilocybin. Dogs really don't sniff for psilocybin. It's very you're kind of good to go, right? I mean, don't flaunt it, but if you want to use it privately and responsibly, you're safe to an extent.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so it's gaining a lot more momentum because you could take some psilocybin in the morning and really not have to worry about the things you would normally have to worry about if you were getting high or something like that.
No, and also I'd say again, it's not that bad, especially if you're pretty reasonable. And I'd have to say, my God, like my brain is clearer, so much clearer on days after I've done mushrooms. Like it's noticeable.
I love it.
Personally. Like I'm waking up so much clearer. So it's really great.
Awesome. And I have a similar, not with a microdosing sort of sampling, but when I do mushrooms, my wife's always like, you're a lot more loving, you're a lot more understanding, everybody should be doing mushrooms. Really. I mean, just imagine, I know Joe Rogan preaches about it, but dude, I am never in a bad mood when I come off of a little experience.
No.
I feel you, man.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, definitely report back to us on your progress.
I will.
We're at the amount of time I promised you. So thank you so much for being part of this, man. I love you. I love this collabo, and we'll have to keep this going.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all about it. So thanks very much for having me.
Awesome, brother. Well, take it easy, Patrick, and listening audience. We love you, and out.
Walk with me, baby, come on and talk with me, come on and take me downtown. Well, walk with me, baby, come on and talk with me, come on and take me downtown. Well, walk with me,